What's up, guys? Joe at Momentum Works. Today, I want to talk about what I like to call Detroit Turbo secret menu items. And what I'm talking about is that when you ordered a Series 60 back there in the olden days when men were men, you can get all different kinds of turbos. And we're going to talk about those turbos today. Stay tuned. So way back in 1987, when the Detroit Series 60 was released, it was originally released as an 11.1 liter. You could also get it as a 12.7 liter. They did this by increasing the stroke on the motor to get additional displacement. And as we know, the Detroit Series 60 went on to become a 14 liter later on in its life as well. Now, you had DDEC 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then you had DDEC 6, which was the end of the line. After that, it was replaced by the DD15. But back in those late 90s, early 2000s, in the DDEC 3 and 4 years, even some DDEC 5 stuff, there were some wild turbo options you can get. These days, when you order a new Cummins or a Volvo or a Pack car, for the most part, you're just getting whatever turbo they have. And it's going to be most likely a VGT turbo, and they might have slightly different sizing, but there's not a whole lot of options. But the Detroit applications were used in so many different applications, boats, motor coaches, on-road trucks, things like that. And they had crazy different horsepower ratings from 430 all the way through 685. And that's where all these different turbos come in. And I just have a few turbos here, guys. I don't have all of them. There are a ton of different turbo variations that originally came in these trucks. But right here, what I have is a Garrett GT42. This turbo would be what would normally come on a road-going Series 60 motor, and we're going to talk mostly about the road-going applications because we are a channel that focuses on truck turbos. GT42, this is a 71 millimeter. They also offered this with a 75 millimeter, and what we're referring to is the inducer on the wheel here. This is a 71 millimeter, and this would be on majority of those trucks. Another thing that they offered is here what we refer to, and we've done a video on the HK turbo. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. This turbo is a massive 80 millimeter inducer, so 9 millimeters larger. And then what I've discovered recently is that they also had this 84 millimeter monster. So we went from a 71 millimeter GT42 to an 80 millimeter GT50 to an 84 millimeter GT55. And along with the larger inducer, there's also a larger turbine wheel as well, different bearing housings and things like that. But guys, we just don't see this in today's truck manufacturing, this wild swing of turbo sizes on that same original block and crankshaft. And it's just really cool to see. And while they don't make the Series 60 anymore, we all know there's a ton of these trucks still out on the road. So if you have a truck that might have a GT42 and you want to build big power with a different cam and different injectors, there are factory turbos available that'll fit, the air supply needs based on how much fuel and ignition timing that you're running. So why do we consider this a secret menu item? Well, because these turbos were available from stock. Upgrading turbos is nothing new, but basically from the factory, you could get these higher output turbochargers and retrofit them to your regular ongoing truck. And I just think that's pretty crazy because in today's market, we just don't see such large turbo. And look at the features. We're talking about these are all boreless wheels. We've got billet wheels, billet boreless wheels in these. I mean, this is just not the kind of stuff that we see in modern truck engine manufacturing these days. Everything's VGT or it's real small turbine. I mean, this is the real deal. This is some big power stuff. The Garrett GT55, I mean, that's a performance application that is still used today under the GTX brand, of course. Garrett GTX series ball bearing. But I mean, these were some real deal turbos, guys. And it's just really cool to see a manufacturer that was doing this. And I feel like a lot of people don't know these turbos exist. Everyone knows about the stock GT42, but I mean, the GT50 and the GT55, I mean, personally, I didn't know that these existed for quite some time, and that's why I'm here sharing them with you. And they are quite expensive, but for the guy that really wants that OEM plus build, and he wants to go with an OEM style turbocharger, these are direct drop in for your DDEC 3 and 4 trucks. Everything's going to line up. They come with an internal wastegate on them. You might have to change your air cleaner piping. I know this comes with a 5 or these are a 6, but I mean, we're just talking about a rubber coupler. But otherwise, they're drop in on your factory manifold. As far as horsepower ratings, Detroit's information on that wasn't super good because they probably didn't intend on people switching these turbos around. They intended on the turbos going on the applications they designed them for. But I would say your GT42 is good for about 500 horsepower ish. This GT50, somewhere around 600 horsepower. And then this GT55, 650 to 700 horsepower. And of course, guys, you can't just throw this turbo on. You're going to need to use the correct injectors, maybe a cam and some tuning as well to make these work. But I mean, they were designed for the Series 60 block because that's what they went on. They went on Series 60 motors. So when we originally started looking at these turbos, you might have thought, hey, this one on the end is definitely a lot smaller, and these two kind of look the same. But now that we got the tops off these old girls, you can see that that's definitely not the case. We still have GT42, GT47, and GT55. But now that we're looking at the turbine wheels, we can notice that there is a gross difference here, guys. Our GT42 is an 82 millimeter by 75. Our GT47 is a 93 by 84. And our GT55, the biggest of them all in this lineup, is a 111 by 102. And this is where a lot of the difference is coming from. Basically, these smaller turbine wheels, they're going to spool up faster. They're not going to need as much exhaust energy. Whereas we get to these larger wheels, they're capable of making a whole lot more horsepower, but that comes at the expense of turbine efficiency. Basically, you need a lot more gusto to get this guy moving than you do this guy. But this guy's going to run out of steam a lot quicker than this one. Think about like a canoe. When you're paddling, the further you stick your paddle in the water, the further you're going to move that canoe, but it takes more energy to do so. That's basically what's going on the backside of these turbines, the backside of these turbos at the turbine shaft. Now, this portion of the video is going to specifically be in reference to these specific turbos, not GT47 or 42, 47, and 55 in general. This is only for these specific Detroit turbos we're talking about. This turbo has a 1.18 AR. This is a 1.27 AR, and the last one is a 1.28 AR. And this is where you might get a little confused because this is obviously the smallest turbine housing, but it's got the largest AR. And that's because AR is not a static number. It's a calculation based off the turbine wheel. So even though this is a 1.28 and this is a 1.18, this is a much larger housing capable of flowing more because of the fact that that AR number, it's a ratio based off of the turbine wheel. And this turbine wheel is so much larger than this one. So even though the ratio number is lower, this is still a much larger housing. All right, so I know this is the main event you've been waiting for. We've got our GT42, we've got our GT47, and we've got our GT55 without the compressor covers. So you're getting a full look at the wheel here. This GT42 that we're looking at, this is a 71 millimeter inducer by 94 millimeter overall wheel size. Our GT47 is an 80 millimeter inducer with 108 overall dimension. And our GT55 is an 84 inducer with 123 overall wheel size. So you can see that, even though the inducers might not have as much of a change, the overall wheel size is much different on these turbos. And, when you compile all these changes together, larger inducer, larger overall wheel size, larger turbine, that's where you're getting these big differences, guys, for these larger horsepower outputs and what they're able to support and do on a daily basis. All right, guys, so that just about wraps up my presentation of the secret turbo menu of Detroit. And it has a little bit of Garrett, information thrown in there, talking about turbine size for a GT42, 47, and 55. As you'll probably see, when Garrett refers to these different things, a lot of times they're referring to by the turbine size. The turbine size can be linked with different size wheels. But if you're interested in any of these turbos, we do carry them. We have them in stock. I'll leave them in the link below. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or shoot us an email. Guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope maybe you learned something. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.